Kingdom of Tonga. Capital, Nuku'alofa, Tongatapu. Flag. The flag, adopted in 1862, is crimson with a cross of the same color mounted in a white square in the upper left corner. Anthem, Kofasio Tuio the Tonga, Tonga National Anthem, begins Iatuamafi Kohama Ikiko, O Almighty God above, Thou art our Lord and sure defense. Monetary unit, the Tongan Paonga, $T, of 100 centati is a paper currency at par with the Australian dollar. There are coins of 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, and 50 centati, and 1 and 2 Tongan payangas, and notes of half, 1, 2, 5, 10, 20, and 50 payangas. $1 equals $0.50720, or $1 equals $1.9716, as of 2004. Weights and measures. The metric system is the legal standard, but some imperial and local weights and measures also are employed. Holidays: New Year's Day, 1st of January, Anzac Day, 25th of April, Crown Prince's birthday, 4th of May, Independence Day, 4th of June, King's birthday, 4th of July, Constitution Day, 4th of November, Tapuai Day, 4th of December, Christmas, 25 to 26 December. Movable religious holidays include Good Friday and Easter Monday. Time, 1 a.m., the following day, equals noon GMT. Location, size, and extent. The Tonga Archipelago, also known as the Friendly Islands, lies scattered east of Fiji in the South Pacific Ocean. Nuku'alofa, the capital, is about 690 kilometers, 430 miles, from Suva, Fiji, and about 1,770 kilometers, 1,100 miles, from Auckland, New Zealand. Consisting of 171 islands of various sizes, only 45 of which are inhabited, Tonga has a total area of 748 square kilometers, 289 square miles, including inland waters as well as Teleki Tokelau and Teleki Tonga, formerly the Minerva Reefs. Comparatively, the area occupied by Tonga is slightly more than 4 times the size of Washington, D.C. It extends 631 kilometers, 392 miles, NSSW, and 209 kilometers, 130 miles, is W&W. The major islands are Tongatapu and Eua, Hawaii, Vava'u, Niuatoputapu and Tafahi, and Niuafo'ou. Tonga's total coastline is about 419 kilometers, 260 miles. The capital city of Nuku'alofa is located on Tongatapu. Topography. The islands run roughly north-south in 2 parallel chains. The western islands are volcanic and the eastern are coralline encircled by reefs. At 10,800 meters, 35,400 feet, deep, the Tonga Trench is one of the lowest parts of the ocean floor. The soil on the low-lying coral islands is porous, being a shallow layer of red volcanic ash, devoid of quartz, but containing broken-down limestone particles. The volcanic islands range in height to a maximum of 1,033 meters, 3,389 feet, on Niuafo'ou. Niuafo'ou, formerly Falcon Island, about 65 kilometers, 40 miles, northwest of Nuku'alofa, is famous for its periodic submergences and reappearances, as a result of earthquakes and volcanic action. There are few lakes or streams. Taufua, Vava'u, Namuka, and Niuafo'ou each have a lake, and there are creeks on Eua and one stream on Niuatoputapu. Other islands rely on wells and the storage of rainwater to maintain a water supply. Climate. The climate of Tonga is basically subtropical. Because the islands are in the southeast trade wind area, the climate is cooler from May to December, when the temperature seldom rises above 27 degrees Celsius, 81 degrees Fahrenheit. The mean annual temperature is 23 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees Fahrenheit, ranging from an average daily minimum of 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, in winter to an average maximum of 32 degrees Celsius, 90 degrees Fahrenheit, in summer. Average annual rainfall, most of which occurs from December to March during the hot season, is 160 centimeters, 63 in, on Tongatapu, 257 centimeters, 101 in, on Niuatoputapu, and 221 centimeters, 87 in, on Vava'u. The mean relative humidity is 80%. Flora and fauna. Some original forest growth can be found on islands in the Vava'u and Tafahi groups. Tree species include coconut palms and paper mulberry. Tropical bushes and flowers are abundant, including hibiscus and datura. A wide variety of fish are found in the coastal waters. Tonga is famous for its flying foxes. Environment. Agricultural activities in Tonga are exhausting the fertility of the soil. The forest area is declining because of land clearing, and attempts at reforestation have had limited success. Water pollution is also a significant problem due to salinization, sewage, and toxic chemicals from farming activities. The impurity of the water supply contributes to the spread of disease. The nation is also vulnerable to cyclones, flooding, earthquakes, and drought. The government has established a water master plan to manage the nation's water resources for 2 decades. The National Development Plan is a more comprehensive attempt to address the nation's environmental concerns. According to a 2006 report issued by the International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, IUCN, threatened species included 2 types of mammals, 3 species of birds, 2 types of reptiles, 4 species of fish, 2 types of mollusks, and 3 species of plants. The Fiji banded iguana, and the loggerhead, green sea, and hawksbill turtles are endangered. The Tonga ground skink has become extinct. There has been some damage to the nation's coral reefs from starfish and from coral and shell collectors. Overhunting threatens the native sea turtle populations. Population. The population of Tonga in 2005 was estimated by the United Nations, UN, at 102,000, which placed it at number 178 in population among the 193 nations of the world. In 2005, approximately 5% of the population was over 65 years of age, with another 39% of the population under 15 years of age. There were 104 males for every 100 females in the country. According to the UN, the annual population rate of change for 2005 to 10 was expected to be 1.8%, a rate the government viewed as satisfactory. Although the fertility rate was reported to be 3.9 births per woman, which was relatively high, ongoing immigration keeps the overall population growth rate lower. The projected population for the year 2025 was 137,000. The overall population density was 136 per square kilometer, 352 per square mile, but only 45 of the nation's 171 islands are inhabited. The UN estimated that 33% of the population lived in urban areas in 2005, and that urban areas were growing at an annual rate of 1.90%. The capital city, Nuku'alofa, Tongatapu, had a population of 35,000 in that year. 2/3 of the population live on the island of Tongatapu. Migration. There is considerable movement toward the larger towns as population pressure on agricultural land increases. Some ethnic non-Tongans born on the islands migrate mainly to Fiji and New Zealand. Emigration by Tongan workers, both skilled and unskilled, has long been of concern to the government. In 1989 approximately 39,400 Tongans lived in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. There are expatriate Tongan communities in Brisbane and Sydney, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand, San Francisco, United States, and on Hawaii. Persons wishing to reside in Tonga must obtain a government permit. Permission is granted only to those taking up approved employment. Immigrant settlement is not encouraged because of the land shortage. There were an estimated 2,000 migrants in Tonga in the year 2000. In that same year the total population of Tongans in the United States was 17,270. Emigration is a significant factor in the economy due to large inflows of remittances. In 2002, worker remittances were $65 million. The net migration rate in 2005 was estimated as 0 migrants per 1,000 population. The government views the migration levels as satisfactory. Ethnic groups. The Tongans are a racially homogeneous Polynesian people. Less than 2% of the population is of European, part European, Chinese, or non-Tongan Pacific Island origin. Languages. Tongan, a Polynesian language not written down until the 19th century, is the language of the kingdom, but government publications are issued in both Tongan and English is taught as a second language in the schools. Religions. Over 98% of Tongans are Christian. According to the last official census in 1996, 41% of the population were members of the Free Wesleyan Church of Tonga, Methodist, 16% were Roman Catholics, 14% were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, 12% were of the Free Church of Tonga, and 17% belonged to other churches, including Seventh-day Adventists, the Assembly of God, the Tokelau Church, a local offshoot of the Methodist Church, Anglicans, Baha'is, Muslims, and Hindus. Though freedom of religion is provided for in the Constitution and there is no state religion, the Constitution does also stipulate that Sunday is the official Sabbath day. As such, the government restricts the operation of a large number of businesses on Sunday. The Tongan Broadcasting Commission also maintains a policy which restricts broadcasts of any religious tenets that are not within the mainstream Christian tradition. Transportation. In 2002, Tonga had 680 kilometers, 423 miles, of roadways, of which 184 kilometers, 114 miles, were paved. There are no bridges in Tonga, but 3 islands in the Vava'u group are connected by 2 causeways. Tonga has no railways. Nuku'alofa and Niuafo'ou are the ports of entry for overseas vessels. In 2005, the merchant fleet consisted of 29 ships of 1,000 GRT or more, some of them foreign-owned and registered as a flag of convenience, totaling 136,977 GRT. Work on extending the port at Nuku'alofa began in 1985. The Pacific Forum Line and the Warner Pacific Line maintain scheduled service from Australia and New Zealand to Tonga via the Samoas and other islands, and cargo ships visit the group from time to time for shipments of copra. Internal sea connections are maintained by the Polynesia Triangle and by the Shipping Corporation of Polynesia. In 2004, there were an estimated 6 airports, but only one of which, as of 2005, had a paved runway. Fua'amatu International at Tongatapu is Tonga's principal airport. Air Pacific, Air New Zealand, Polynesian Airlines, and Hawaiian Air operate scheduled international flights from Fua'amatu. The government-owned Friendly Island Airways has scheduled flights between Tongatapu, Hawaii, Eua, Vava'u, and Niuatoputapu. In 2001, the latest year for which data was available, about 56,800 passengers were carried on scheduled domestic and international airline flights. History. Since the Tongan language was not written down until the 19th century, the early history of Tonga, which means south, is based on oral tradition. Hereditary absolute kings, Tui Tonga, date back to Aitu in the 10th century. Around the 14th century, the 23rd king, Niuafo'ou, while retaining his sacred powers, divested himself of much of his executive authority, transferring it to his brother Ma'angamada, whom he thereafter called the Tui Tonga. About the middle of the 17th century, the 7th temporal king, Potophiles, transferred the executive power to his brother Ngala, called the Tui Tonga, and thereafter the powers gradually passed into the hands of the latter and his descendants. According to tradition, in the mid-19th century, upon the death of the then Tui Tonga, those powers were conferred upon the 19th Tui Tonga, Tongatapu, founder of the present dynasty. European chronicles disclose that the island of Niuatoputapu was discovered by the Dutch navigators Jan Schouten and Jacob Lemaire in 1616. In 1643, Abel Tasman discovered Tongatapu, and from then until 1767, when Samuel Wallace anchored at Niuatoputapu, there was no contact with the outside world. Captain James Cook visited the Tongatapu and Tafahi groups in 1773 and again in 1777, and called Lefuka in the Tafahi group the Friendly Island because of the gentle nature of its people. Hence the archipelago received its nickname, the Friendly Islands. It was in the waters of the Tafahi group that the famous mutiny on the British ship Bounty occurred in 1789. The first Wesleyan missionaries landed in Tonga in 1826. The first half of the 19th century was a period of civil conflict in Tonga, as three lines of kings all sought dominance. They were finally checked during the reign of Tongatapu, who in 1831 took the name George. By conquest, George Tapu I, R. 1845–93, gathered all power in his own hands and united the islands. He abolished the feudal system of land tenure and became a constitutional monarch in 1875. Meanwhile, by the middle of the century, most Tongans had become Christians, the great majority being Wesleyans, and the king himself was strongly influenced by the missionaries. In the latter part of the century, there were religious and civil conflicts between the Wesleyan Mission Church and the newly established Free Wesleyan Church of Tonga. After the dismissal of the Prime Minister, the Reverend Shirley Valdemar Baker, in 1890, the new government allowed full freedom of worship. 10 years later, during the reign, 1893–1918, of George II, a treaty of friendship was concluded between the United Kingdom and Tonga, and a protectorate was proclaimed. During World War II, Tongan soldiers under Allied command fought the Japanese in the Solomon Islands, and New Zealand and U.S. forces were stationed on Tongatapu, which served as an important shipping point. Two more treaties of friendship between the United Kingdom and Tonga were signed in 1958 and 1968, according to which Tonga remained under British protection, but with full freedom in internal affairs. On June 4, 1970, Tonga ceased being a British protectorate and became an independent member of the Commonwealth of Nations, with King Tongatapu IV, who had succeeded to the throne upon the death of his mother, Queen Tapu, R. 1918–65 as head of state. The new status brought few immediate changes, apart from the fact that it added Tongan control of foreign affairs to self-rule in domestic matters. In 1972, Tonga claimed the uninhabited Minerva Reefs, now Teleki Tokelau and Teleki Tonga, situated about 480 kilometers, 300 miles, southwest of Nuku'alofa, in order to prevent an Anglo-American corporation from founding an independent Republic of Minerva on the reefs in order to gain certain tax advantages. Many of the government's strongest critics gained seats in the 1987 legislative elections. The unprecedented turnover was thought to reflect changing attitudes toward traditional authority. However, the traditional leaders continued in charge of the government, with Prince Tafahi Tafahi elected as Prime Minister. The island's dissident pro-democracy movement, led by Achilles Ipohiv, won the February 1990 general election, but it remained a minority within the legislature. A government scandal over selling Tongan passports to Hong Kong Chinese led to popular support for the opposition. Baron Vale replaced Prince Tafahi Tafahi as Prime Minister in August 1991. King Tongatapu IV organized the Christian Democratic Party in time for the 1993 election to provide greater coordination for his supporters and to weaken the democracy movement. However, pressure from the pro-democracy forces continued in the February 1993 general election when the People's Democratic Movement won 6 of the 9 open seats. Parliamentary elections were held in March 1999, when about 51% of eligible voters cast ballots, the lowest voter turnout in the country's history. 5 of the 9 members elected were from the Human Rights and Democracy Movement, HRDM. King Tongatapu IV appointed his youngest son, 41-year-old Prince Slavaka Prime Minister in January 2000. When the previous Prime Minister retired, observers speculated that the king's oldest son, Crown Prince Tapu would be named Prime Minister. It is likely that Tapu was passed over for the post because of his stated opposition to preserving the king's right to make lifetime appointments. His younger brother, who became the country's fourth prime minister since 1950, has been outspoken in his criticism of the country's democracy movement. 52 candidates ran for the 9 People's Representative seats in the legislature in March 2002. The HRDM won 7 of the seats. In the 2005 elections, the HRDM took 70% of the vote on 7 of 9 open seats. Although the movement's improvement in electoral standing may signal popular support for democratic reform, it is seen as the king's prerogative to initiate change. Tonga experienced a financial scandal in 2001, when the king's official court jester, Jesse Bogdanoff, an American businessman, invested $26 million in a government trust fund that subsequently disappeared. The money had been raised by the sale of Tongan citizenship and special passports to Asians, especially Hong Kong Chinese concerned with the transfer of Hong Kong to China. The $26 million represented more than half the government's annual budget. The Tongan government's lawsuit against Bogdanoff was settled in 2004. On July 22, 2005, public workers declared Tonga's first national strike. The 47-day strike ended in early September, when the chairman of the Public Servants Association presented the king with a petition calling him to dismiss Prime Minister Prince Salukalavalakaʻata and all 14 cabinet ministers. The petition also demanded a commission be established to review the constitution within 1 year, and called for a more democratic form of government, as well as the return of royal family-controlled government assets, including the internet domain address and the power company. In October 2005, Parliament voted to establish the National Committee of the Kingdom of Tonga for Political Reforms, with the goal of examining and improving Tonga's form of government. Committee members were to be drawn from the executive and legislative, both noble and commoner, branches of the government, as well as from the non-governmental population. On December 15, 2005, after 10 years of membership talks, Tonga became the 150th member of the World Trade Organization. As part of its accession agreement, Tonga agreed to cut its import tariffs and to open many of its vital services to foreign companies. Government. Tonga is an independent kingdom. According to the Constitution of 1875, as amended, the government is divided into 3 main branches: the Sovereign, Privy Council, and Cabinet, the Whaelele, Legislative Assembly, and the Judiciary. The King in Council is the chief executive body, and the Cabinet, presided over by the appointed Prime Minister, makes executive decisions of lesser importance. The Prime Minister is appointed for a life term. Lawmaking power is vested in the 30-member Legislative Assembly, which consists of 12 members of the cabinet sitting ex officio, 9 nobles elected to 3-year terms by the 33 hereditary nobles of Tonga, and 9 representatives popularly elected to 3-year terms. Sessions must be held at least once in every calendar year. Legislation passed by the Privy Council is subject to approval at the next meeting of the Legislative Assembly. Women voted for the first time in 1960, and the first woman was elected to the legislature in 1975. All literate citizens 21 years of age or older are eligible to vote. In November 2003, the King approved amendments to Clause 7 of the Constitution, which limited the press, thus effectively reducing freedom of speech. In October 2004, Chief Justice Webster found these amendments to be inconsistent with Clause 7, and therefore unconstitutional. The next elections were to be held in 2008. Political parties. The Tonga People's Party, TPP, led by Viliami Whakafuka, and the Pro-Democracy Human Rights and Democracy Movements, HRDM, led by Akilai Pohiva, were the principal political parties active in 2003. Local government. The islands are divided administratively into 3 districts: Vava'u in the north, Hapai in the center, and Tongatapu in the south. Hapai, Vava'u, and the outlying islands are administered by governors who are members of the Privy Council and are responsible to the Prime Minister. Minor officials perform statutory duties in the villages. Town and district officials have been popularly elected since 1965. They represent the central government in the villages. The district official has authority only over a group of villages. Titles of nobility were first bestowed in 1875, and later in 1882, 1887, 1903, and 1923. With the hereditary titles were granted villages and lands. Judicial system. The Supreme Court exercises jurisdiction in major civil and criminal cases. Other cases, heard in the Magistrates' Court or the Land Court, may be appealed to the Supreme Court and then to the Court of Appeal, the appellate court of last resort. The Privy Council has jurisdiction over cases on appeal from the Land Court dealing with titles of nobility and estate boundaries. With the ratification of the 1968 Friendship Treaty, UK extraterritorial jurisdiction lapsed, and British and other foreign nations became fully subject to the jurisdiction of the Tongan courts. The judiciary is independent of the King and the executive branch, although Supreme Court justices are appointed by the King. Criminal defendants are afforded the right to counsel, and the right to a fair public trial is protected by law and honored in practice. The King may commute a death sentence. In addition, the court system consists of a court-martial for the Tonga Defence Services, a court tribunal for the police force, and a court of review for the Inland Revenue Department. Armed Forces. The Tonga Defence Force was organized during World War II, became defunct in 1946 and was reactivated in 1952. It consists of a regular cadre and volunteers serving an initial training period, followed by attendance at annual training camps. Forces are organized into Marines, Royal Guards, a Navy, a police force, and a newly created air wing. The naval squadron consists of several fast patrol boats policing territorial waters. International cooperation. Tonga was admitted to the United Nations on September 14, 1999. It participates in ISCAP and several non-regional specialized agencies, such as the FAO, UNCTAD, UNESCO, the World Bank, and WHO. Tonga is also a member of the Asian Development Bank, the Commonwealth of Nations, the ACP Group, G77, the South Pacific Regional Trade and Economic Cooperation Agreement, SPARTACA, the Alliance of Small Island States, ASIS, and Pacific Island Forum, formerly called the South Pacific Forum. It has observed status in the WTO. In environmental cooperation, Tonga is part of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the London Convention, the Montreal Protocol, MARPOL, the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and the UN Conventions on the Law of the Sea, Climate Change, and Desertification. Economy. The economy is largely agricultural and still contains a substantial non-monetary sector. The principal cash crops are squash, fish, copra and coconut products, vanilla bean extract and bananas. Agricultural exports make up 2/3 of total exports. 1/3 to 1/2 of export earnings come from the sale of squash to Japan, though the main source of foreign exchange is remittances, followed by tourism. A proportion of food is imported and the economy remains dependent on external aid and remittances from expatriate Tongolese to offset its chronic trade deficit. It is estimated that there are more expatriates, over 100,000, than current citizens. Real GDP growth, which had peaked at 6.5% in fiscal year 1999-2000, fell to 0.5% in 2001, attributable to the global economic slowdown, and, in particular, its impact on tourism. The GDP growth rate in 2002 stood at 1.5% and at 1.9% in 2003. In 2002, the year was ushered in by Tonga's worst cyclone since 1961, Cyclone Waka, which tore through the northern islands of Niuafo'ou and Vava'u on 30 December 31, 2001, destroying an estimated 90% of the crops. About 350 homes were destroyed, with another 750 homes, 23 schools, and numerous hospitals, churches, and other structures seriously damaged. Water supply, electricity, and communications were also severely disrupted, with total damage estimated at $50 million. donor countries, principally New Zealand, Australia, French Polynesia, and the United States, responded with food aid and emergency assistance, as did several missions and charities. The government lifted import duties on construction materials. The net result was a slight uptick in real GDP growth in 2001 to 1.5% despite the cyclone damage due to the stimulus given the construction industry as well as record high prices for squash and vanilla beans. Another economic shock in 2002 was the discovery of the loss of most of the assets, about $26.5 million, from the Tonga Trust Fund, TTF, through failed investments and, perhaps, simple fraud, while under management by American businessmen. The assets came primarily from selling Tongan passports to nervous residents of Hong Kong before its reversion to Chinese rule in 1997. Income. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, reports that in 2005 Tonga's gross domestic product, GDP, was estimated at $244.0 million. The CIA defines GDP as the value of all final goods and services produced within a nation in a given year and computed on the basis of purchasing power parity, PPP, rather than value as measured on the basis of the rate of exchange based on current dollars. The per capita GDP was estimated at $2,300. The annual growth rate of GDP was estimated at 1.5%. The average inflation rate in 2002 was 10.3%. It was estimated that agriculture accounted for 23% of GDP, industry 13%, and services 64%. According to the World Bank, in 2002 remittances from citizens working abroad totaled $62 million or about $611 per capita and accounted for approximately 42.7% of GDP. Labor. Tonga's labor force in 1996, the last year reported, was 33,910. As of 1997, the latest year for which data was available, approximately 65% of the workforce was engaged in agriculture. The unemployment rate in 1996, the latest year for which data was available, was estimated at 13.3%. The government has issued a labor code establishing a wage structure, a system of job classification, and provisions for workers' compensation. Holidays are prescribed by law. According to the Constitution, it is not lawful to work, to play games, or to engage in trade on Sunday. Workers have the right, in theory, to form unions under the 1964 Trade Union Act, but as of 2002, none had been formed. Various government agencies and public enterprises offer vocational training. Child labor is not used in the wage sector and is virtually non-existent throughout the economy. The work week is limited to 40 hours. There is no set minimum wage. Generally, labor's laws are well enforced on the main island of Tongatapu but are more inconsistently enforced on the outer islands. Agriculture. About 36% of Tonga is agricultural land, including small amounts of permanent pasture. With increasing population pressure on the land, more land is being intensively cultivated and less is available for fallow. The use of fertilizers, high-protein strains of corn, and similar methods to improve the efficiency of land use has become increasingly necessary. According to the Constitution of 1875, all the land in the kingdom belongs to the Crown and cannot be alienated. Much of it, however, consists of hereditary estates that were bestowed upon various chiefs, who leased the lands to farmers at a nominal annual rent. Since 1890, the Crown has been responsible for the collection of rents and the granting of allotments. On reaching the age of 16, every Tongan male taxpayer is entitled under the Constitution to a tax allotment of 1 API, 3.34 hectares/8.25 acres. These allotments are hereditary, pass from generation to generation in accordance with the law of succession, and may not be sold. A tenant may be ejected for non-payment of rent or for failing to comply with the planting regulations, under which every Tongan holder of a tax allotment is legally required to plant 200 coconut trees, which he must keep free from weeds. In recent years, however, population increases have made it impossible to guarantee the API to all those entitled to one. Principal subsistence crops are yams, taro, sweet potatoes, and manioc. Estimated production in 2004 included coconuts, 58,000 tons, sweet potatoes, 6,000 tons, cassava, 9,000 tons, oranges, 1,000 tons, and bananas, 700 tons. Vanilla beans have become an important cash crop, 130 tons in 2004, especially on Vava'u. Agricultural products accounted for 45% of exports in 2004. Animal husbandry. Beef cattle are generally kept for grazing in coconut plantations to keep the undergrowth in check and to provide additional income. Every householder has several hogs, which generally are not sold but are used for feasts. Sheep were brought into Tonga in 1954 but did not thrive, and in 1956 the entire flock was slaughtered. Livestock in 2005 included 81,000 hogs, 12,500 goats, 11,400 horses, and 11,250 head of cattle. Fishing. Fish are abundant in the coastal waters, but the fishing industry is relatively undeveloped, and the supply of fish is insufficient to meet local demand. Thus, canned fish has been imported in recent years. Principal species caught are tuna and marlin. The fish catch was 4,458 tons in 2003. Exports of fish products were valued at almost $3.56 million that year. Forestry. Forest land covers about 5.5% of Tonga's total area, mainly on Eua and Vava'u, but this diminishing resource has not been efficiently exploited, and much wood for construction must be imported. Groundwood production in 2004 was 2,100 cubic meters, 74,000 cubic feet. There is a government sawmill on Eua. Charcoal is manufactured from logs and coconut shells. Mining. Tonga had few known mineral resources. A limited amount of crushed stone is produced at local quarries. Energy and power. Tonga has no proven reserves of oil, natural gas, coal or oil refining capacity. Tonga is entirely dependent upon imports of oil, natural gas or coal to meet its hydrocarbon needs. In 2002, the country's imports and consumption of refined petroleum products each averaged 780 barrels per day. There were no recorded imports or consumption of natural gas or coal in 2002. Tonga's primary energy source is electricity, all of it powered by fossil fuels. In 2002, the country's electric generating capacity totaled 0.008 million kilowatt. Electric power output in that year totaled 0.034 billion kilowatt-hour. Demand for electric power in 2002 was 0.032 billion kilowatt-hour. Industry. Encouragement of new industries was the goal of Tonga's 8 five-year plans, 1966 to 2008. Industries include the manufacture of concrete blocks, metal products, woolen knitwear, leather goods, furniture, soft drinks, soap, sports equipment, yachts, and paint. 10-meter, 33-foot, epoxy veneer molded yachts are produced by Marine Tonga, a Tongan-German joint venture. At the government-backed Small Industry Center in Nuku'alofa, more advanced products are made, including refrigerators, jewelry, bicycles, toys, furniture, wheelbarrows, and many excavators. Other consumer goods are assembled for use locally in the neighboring countries. A small but growing construction sector developed in response to the inflow of relief monies following Cyclone Waka, which hit during the last 2 days of 2001, and the need for construction services for hospitals, schools, wharves, etc. Long-established industries are coconut processing, sawmilling, and local handicrafts. Nuku'alofa is the only commercial and urban center. Industry accounts for just 13% of GDP. Science and technology. Pango Agricultural College, part of the Free Wesleyan Church education system, offers diploma and certificate courses. Tonga Maritime Polytechnical Institute is located in Nuku'alofa. Domestic trade. Village stores carry a stock of flour, sugar, canned meats, textiles, hardware, soap, kerosene, tobacco, and matches. In the larger towns, these shops are managed by Tongans for European trading firms. Storekeepers act as agents for the Commodities Board and often extend credit to their customers until the end of the harvest. The board's produce division helps market bananas, melons, and pineapples. The development of cooperatives, which serve as savings and loan, produce marketing, and handicraft manufacturing organizations, has been actively pursued. Government business hours are 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Monday to Friday. Private business hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday to Friday. All shops are closed on Sunday. Banks are open from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday to Friday, and from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. on Saturdays. Foreign trade. Tonga suffers from chronic trade deficits. Vegetables, including squash, are Tonga's main export commodities. Other exports include fish, spices and vanilla, and shellfish. In 2004, Tonga's primary export partners were Japan, 37.1%, China, 18.7%, the United States, 17.7%, Taiwan, 8.7%, and New Zealand, 7.4%. Primary import partners in 2004 were New Zealand, 37.1%, Fiji, 24.3%, Australia, 9.1%, China, 8.9%, and the United States, 6.3%. Balance of payments. Since 1960, Tonga has had a growing trade deficit, offset by funds from the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and the Asian Development Bank, ADB. In 2004, Tonga had exports valued at an estimated $34 million, and imports valued at an estimated $122 million. Tonga carried an external debt burden of $63.4 million in 2001. In fiscal year 2001-02, Tonga received $5.5 million in economic aid from Australia, and $2.3 million from New Zealand. Banking and securities. The Bank of Tonga was formed in 1971, with the government holding 40% of the shares and 20% each held by the Bank of Hawaii, the Bank of New Zealand, and the Bank of New South Wales. The overseas banks provided staff and supervision for the Bank of Tonga, which offers all commercial services and has assumed responsibility for government savings, traders' current accounts, and foreign exchange dealings. The Tongan Development Bank, TDB, was founded in 1977. Tonga's fiscal policy has traditionally been cautious, with taxation and expenditure measures balancing in the recurrent budget and the development budget being financed mainly through grants and soft loans. Legislation to set up a central bank was passed in late 1988 and the National Reserve Bank came into existence the following year. The Ministry of Finance, the Board of Currency Commissioners, the Board of Coinage Commissioners, and the island's only commercial bank, the Bank of Tonga, had until then jointly performed central bank functions. A second commercial bank, MBF Bank, was launched in late 1993. Legislation has been passed to enable Tonga to become an international banking center. The legislation permits up to 4 foreign banks to establish operations in the capital. The International Monetary Fund reports that in 2001, currency in demand deposits, an aggregate commonly known as M1, were equal to $20.6 million. In that same year, M2, an aggregate equal to M1 plus savings deposits, small time deposits, and money market mutual funds, was $67.0 million. Tonga has no stock issues or securities trading. Insurance. Blue Shield, Oceania, insurance covers life, health, travel, workers' compensation, total permanent disability, accident, and local consultation services. There were at least 7 other major insurers doing business in Tonga in 1999. Public finance. About half of all public revenues accrued from customs duties on imported goods, The remainder came mainly from export duties, port fees, income taxes, and stamp revenues. Principal items of expenditure were public health, medical services, education, and agriculture. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, estimated that in FY 1900 Tonga's central government took in revenues of approximately $39.9 million and had expenditures of $52.4 million. Revenues minus expenditures totaled approximately minus $12.5 million. Total external debt was $63.4 million. Taxation. Income tax is levied at progressive rates. Resident businesses pay 15% on profits up to $100,000, and 30% thereafter. Non-resident businesses pay 37.5% on profits up to $50,000 and 42.5% thereafter. All male Tongans 16 years of age and older, except the aged and infirm, pay an annual head tax, the receipts of which are used to finance free education and medical benefits. There is also a 5% sales tax. Customs and duties. Tonga has a single-column tariff based on the Customs Cooperation Council nomenclature, with custom duties ranging from 30 to 65% of the CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. A 20% port and services tax is involved in the percentages. Tariffs are applied to most private sector imports, primarily for revenue purposes. Higher tariffs apply to cigarettes, alcoholic beverages, and petroleum, while public sector goods are exempt. Foreign investment. Although some non-Tongans have leased large plantations and residential and business sites, there is little private foreign investment. In 1997, foreign direct investment, FDI, was reported as $3 million, and then for the next 4 years, 1998 to 2001, $2 million a year. In 2003, FDI amounted to 1.65% of GDP. Government policy is that foreign investment is welcome. The statutory framework was laid out in the Industrial Development Incentives Act, IDAC, of 1978 that provides for a tax holiday of 5 years extendable to 15 years, with additional tax holidays for expansions of an enterprise. Raw materials and semi-processed goods imported to manufacture and exported finished product are exempt from customs duties for 2 years, and all imports of capital goods, machineries and construction materials are assessed at 50% of port and service taxes. With the view to husbanding the country's foreign currency resources, there are restrictions, mostly on a pro-rata basis, on the ability to move hard currency out of the country. Under current IMF-guided efforts at fiscal reform, this regime has been criticized for overbroad tax exemptions and is scheduled to be replaced with a new investment incentives law. Aside from the obvious problems of remoteness and lack of development, the main impediment to foreign investment is not the legal framework but its administration, which is due to lack of transparency and predictability. There are no free trade zones in Tonga, but in 1980 the government established the small business center near Nuku'alofa that serves as an improved industrial park for small enterprises. The bulk of Tonga's foreign reserves are invested in Australia. In 2002, in an extraordinary financial scandal, it was revealed that all by about $2.2 million of the Tonga Trust Fund, TTF minus $26.50 in all, had been lost. Economic development. Tonga's 8 5-year plans, 1966 to 2008, emphasized development of the island's economic infrastructure, increasing agricultural production by revitalizing the copra and banana industries, improvements in telecommunications and transport, and expansion of tourism, industry, and exports. Through the non-profit Commodities Board, the government has a trading monopoly in copra, bananas, melons, and other produce. In the 1990s, tourism revenues helped offset Tonga's large merchandise trade deficits, but substantial amounts of foreign aid continued to be required. From 1993 to 98, the economic growth was driven by a rise in exports of squash, increases in aid, and several large construction projects. Growth peaked in 1999 2000s at 6.5% but then plunged to only 0.5% in 2001 in the global recession that began the first quarter of 2001. The GDP growth rate in 2002 stood at 1.5% and at 1.9% in 2003. The country is working toward improvement of the quality and standard of living for all Tongans. This is to be achieved through policy initiatives in 5 areas: 1. Currency stabilization, 2. Privatization, 3. Updating and restructuring of the operations of state-owned enterprises, SOEs, 4. Maintenance and improvements in the infrastructure, and 5. Environmental protection. Other goals include continuing support for public sector reform, promotion of the private sector as the engine of growth, and sustainable environmental management and equitable social development. The economic reforms are being pursued in conjunction with political reforms that aim at bringing more democracy to the government. Social development. Every family is provided by law with sufficient land to support itself. There is no social welfare department. The medical and education departments and the missions provide what welfare services are available. The only pension scheme is one for civil servants. Polynesian cultural traditions have kept most women in subservient roles, and few have risen to positions of leadership. Inheritance laws discriminate against women, and women may not own land. Domestic violence is prevalent and dealt with according to tribal law and custom. Spousal rape is not recognized and the law specifies that relations between spouses cannot be deemed as rape. The Center for Women and Children focuses on improving the economic and social conditions for women. Child abuse is rare. Human rights are generally well respected in Tonga. However, political dissent is suppressed. Health. Tongans receive free medical and dental treatment, but must pay for dentures. Non-Tongans are charged on a fixed scale. There is one government medical department hospital each in Tongatapu, Vava'u, Hawaii, and Eua Island, with several dispensaries. There are 4 hospitals and 14 healthcare centers, with a total of 307 beds on the islands. In 2004, there were an estimated 34 physicians, 317 nurses, 19 midwives, and 32 dentists per 100,000 people. Tonga is free of malaria and most tropical diseases, but tuberculosis, filariasis, typhoid fever, dysentery, and various eye and skin diseases remain common health problems. Nevertheless, in comparison with many other Pacific islands, Tonga is a healthy country. Approximately 85% of children were vaccinated against measles. By 1969, a joint WHO-UNICEF project had considerably reduced the incidence of yaws. Other health projects deal with school sanitation, community water supplies, maternal and child health, and nursing education. The population has access to safe water and adequate sanitation. Life expectancy as of 2005 was estimated at 69.53 years. In the same year, infant mortality was an estimated 12.62 per 1,000 live births. As of 2002, the crude birth rate and overall mortality rate were estimated at, respectively, 24 and 5.6 per 1,000 people. The fertility rate was 3 children per woman. Housing. Village houses usually have reed sides and a sloping roof thatched with sugarcane or coconut leaves. The posts are of ironwood, and braided cord takes the place of nails. More modern houses, especially in the towns, are built of wood, with roofs of corrugated iron. Unlike the village houses, they often contain more than one room and have verandas. Tongan taxpayers are entitled to an allotment of land from the governments. Each urban Tongan taxpayer receives an annual rent subsidy in lieu of this land allotment. In 1986, the housing stock totaled 15,091 units. In 1996, the housing stock was at 16,194. The average household size was 6 people. In the decade between censuses, the number of European-style homes increased by about 39% while the number of Tongan-style hut dwellings decreased by over 60%. About 66% of all housing was of European-style wooden construction, 19.5% was European-style cement or brick, and 6.8% was Tongan-style thatched roof and walls. At least 66% of all housing stock was on Tongatapu. About 84.6% of all households had access to piped water and 55.8% had flush toilets. About 81.4% of all housing was owner-occupied. Education. The first schools in Tonga were started by the Wesleyan mission in 1828, even before the conversion to Christianity of the Tongans. Practically all primary education was controlled by the mission until 1882 when the government took over the educational system. In 1906, various missionary organizations again were allowed to establish schools. Primary education is compulsory for 6 years. No tuition is charged at government schools, except the high school, but small fees are charged at mission schools. General secondary school lasts for 5 years. Students may choose to continue with 1 or 2 more years of upper secondary education. Selected Tongan students prepare for the New Zealand School Certificate Examination. In 2001, about 29% of children between the ages of 3 and 4 were enrolled in some type of preschool program. Primary school enrollment in 2000 was estimated at about 100% of age-eligible students. The same year, secondary school enrollment was about 72.8% of age-eligible students. It is estimated that about nearly all students complete their primary education. The student-to-teacher ratio for primary school was at about 22:1 in 2003, the ratio for secondary school was about 14:1. In 2000, private schools accounted for about 9.2% of primary school enrollment and 72.8% of secondary enrollment. The University of the South Pacific operates an extension center in Tonga. A teacher training college, established in 1944, provides a 2-year course. A government scholarship program provides the opportunity for Tongan students to pursue higher education abroad. In 2001, it was estimated that about 4% of the tertiary-age population were enrolled in tertiary education programs. The adult literacy rate for 2004 was estimated at about 98.9%. As of 2003, public expenditure on education was estimated at 4.9% of GDP, or 13.2% of total government expenditures. Libraries and museums. Since 1971, the Ministry of Education has operated a joint library service with the University of the South Pacific. Its library in Nuku'alofa has 9,000 volumes covering agriculture, small business management, adult education, and an important collection of Pacificana. The Ministry of Education library has 12,500 volumes. Most of the secondary and high schools have libraries. The Tonga College Museum's collection includes artifacts of Tonga's history. Notable monuments include a great trilithon known as the Hamanga and some 45 langas, great rectangular platforms of recessed tiers of coral limestone blocks that were erected as the tombs of medieval kings. Media. The government's radio telegraph station at Nuku'alofa has substations at Nafu, Vava'u, Pangai, Hefva and Namuka, in the Hepai Group, Eua, and Niuatoputapu. There is also a direct overseas telegraph service linking Nuku'alofa with Wellington, Suva, Apia, and Pago Pago. An internal radio telephone service connects Nuku'alofa, Eua, Namuka, Hefva, and Vava'u, and a direct overseas radio telephone service links Nuku'alofa to other Pacific Island capitals. In 2002, there were 11,200 mainline phones in service throughout the country. In 2004, there were 9,000 mobile phones in use nationwide. The Tonga Broadcasting Commission's Radio Tonga was established in 1961. It broadcasts about 75 hours a week in Tongan, English, Fijian, and Samoan. Commercial advertising is accepted. In 2004 there were 3 privately owned radio stations. The government owned one of the 3 television stations operating in 2004. In 1997 Tonga had 600 radios and 18 television sets in use per 1,000 population. In 2002, there were 2,900 internet subscribers. In 2004, there were 8 newspapers and news magazines in print. The government publishes a weekly newspaper, the Tonga Chronicle, which has an average circulation, in 2002, of 7,000 copies in Tongan and English. There are also church newspapers issued by missions and a few private publications printed at regular intervals. The Constitution provides for free speech and a free press, although occasional infringements of press freedoms do occur. In non-government publications, opposition opinion appears regularly, usually without interference, but journalists were being targeted for prosecution in civil lawsuits by the Ministry of Police. Organizations. Extension of consumer cooperatives has been actively encouraged by the government. The Tonga Chamber of Commerce and Industry is in Nuku'alofa. National youth organizations are typically affiliated with religious or educational institutions, including the Catholic Youth Association, Free Church of Tonga Youth Associations, Free Wesleyan Church Youth Association, Tonga Ex-Commonwealth Youth Program Diplomats Association, and Tapu Farmers. Scouting and YMCA/HIP programs are also available. Meetings of Christian Endeavor societies and Bible classes are well attended by all ages. There are sports associations promoting amateur competitions for athletes of all ages in a variety of pastimes. Every Tongan village has a community house where a ceremonial cloth, tapa, is made by groups of women. The Tongan Women's Progressive Association, formed in 1956, conducts programs for the betterment of the village conditions and holds classes in a variety of subjects. There is a national chapter of the Red Cross Society. Tourism, travel, and recreation. Popular tourist sites are the Royal Palace and terraced tombs in Nuku'alofa. Most visitors enjoy a traditional evening feast of suckling pig, crayfish, chicken, and assorted accompaniments. Fishing, swimming, and sailing are popular. Rugby is a favorite spectator sport. Tourists must have a valid passport as well as an onward/return ticket. Visitors' visas are required by nationals of 138 countries including China and Spain. They are provided upon arrival and valid for 1 month. The tourist industry is a small but growing source of foreign exchange revenues. In 2003, there were 40,110 tourist arrivals, with 57% of travelers coming from Australia and New Zealand. In 2005, the U.S. Department of State estimated the daily cost of staying in Nuku'alofa and other areas of Tonga at $167. Famous Tongans. King George Tapu I, Tongatapu, 1797–1893, ruled for 48 years. During his reign, Tonga became a Christian nation, abolished serfdom, and acquired a constitution. His prime minister, Shirley Valdemar Baker, 1831–1903, was a Wesleyan clergyman who, after being deposed in 1890, became an episcopal minister and then returned to Tonga. The most famous Tongan of this century was Queen Tapu, 1900–65, whose rule began in 1918. Her dynasty, the Tapu, is the third branch of the royal family and traces its descent back to Eua, the first Tui Tonga of whom there is record. Queen Salote's son, King Tongatapu IV, b.1918, succeeded to the throne in 1965 and was formally crowned in 1967. Dependencies. Tonga has no territories or colonies.